After waking up a chimpanzee that had been hibernating for 6 months, a professor confirms in 1991 that his hibernation experiment was successful. Albert and Max volunteer for the experiment on humans, which is the next step. Max wants to go on an adventure and spend some time away from his wife and daughter, who are upset with him for leaving them. Albert is a biologist who wants to contribute to human progress. The professor tells the press conference that the two will be hibernating for 3 years, and that because the human body differs from a chimpanzee's, there might be some risks. Before they are effectively put to sleep, the guys stealthily bring a flask and some cigarettes when they are brought to the hibernation capsules. Years later, when Max and Albert awaken, a group of women lead them to an unfamiliar white room and serve them breakfast. One of the women explains to them that the food is actually containers with a paste that imitates the food inside because it is so hard that it cannot be eaten. The guys lament their lack of taste, but they attribute it to a hibernation-related side effect. Next, Max pulls out the flask and cigarettes, offering them to Albert as a small dessert. But the smoke sets off an alarm right away and the women dash in to cover them with foam in order to put it out. After that, the guys keep asking about the professor, so a doctor and her assistant Lamia stop by to see how they're doing. The women clarify that the professor is a myth and that his experiments were shelved due to a subsequent global conflict. The women eventually divulge the information, which is that they slept for 53 years, which means that it is now 2044 and Max and Albert are bewildered. To make matters worse, Max and Albert are the only survivors of the war, which killed all men. The pair, bewildered and terrified, tries to flee, but the door electrocutes them and renders them unconscious. When they awaken, Albert deduces that they are testing their responses to a psychological shock and that this is probably the second phase of the experiment. Max is still in disbelief that there are no longer any men, and he questions how women procreate. As Lamia is watching them, she hears this and explains that they reproduce by parthenogenesis, a true asexual process that occurs in many animals and doesn't require fertilization. It is at that point that a second woman from the Genetics faction walks into Lamia's workspace, tampering with her belongings and remarking that it's unfortunate that Lamia left Genetics to join the Archeo. The woman notes that it would be wiser to turn the guys over to Genetics before departing. Later, when Max and Albert's room TV is switched on and a girl appears discussing parthenogenesis, Max needs to be told by Albert that the children are made in test tubes. While Lamia remarks that their reproduction strategy is ideal, Max charges them with brainwashing children. Max and Albert reflect that evening on the years they have lost and the passing of their loved ones. They console one another and drink the last of the alcohol, promising never to freeze again. Later, as they watch TV, Max notes that, with the right actions, this place might turn out to be a paradise for them. However, Albert chastises him for not using his better judgment in such a grave circumstance. When Lamia arrives to inquire about their well-being at that precise moment, Max responds in a flirtatious way that Lamia finds confusing. He then approaches Lamia and abruptly steals her first kiss, asking if they could go for a walk or even dance. Lamia loses it and throws him to the ground right away before walking away. When Lamia is by herself, she discovers that something has awakened inside of her and that she can't stop thinking about the kiss. The guys are eventually allowed to exit the room and are led to the biosanctuary, where they discover animals that were radioactively embalmed. They also discover a tree bearing 2 small apples, which they eat. Her Excellency, this society's head, approaches them at that precise moment. Emma, a Genetics member, responds that the men are actually 86 years old, but they haven't aged physically because they have been hibernating. Max gets closer to introducing himself correctly, but just as he is about to knock herself down, the guards assume he is going to attack her. Her Excellency gives the men some history lessons and orders the guards to release Max. The M-bomb, a chemical that was intended to temporarily paralyze male genes in order to end the war, was created by the professor. However, it ultimately erased them. Although Max and Albert can now control reproduction, none of the women express interest in doing so. In order to help women remember not to lose paradise, Her Excellency gestures to the tree and explains that it represents the story of Adam and Eve. When she discovers the apples are gone, she angrily gives the guards orders to imprison the men. Albert then advises Max that they should leave, believing that there has to be a better world out there. Lamia visits the elder, the only person who is still aware of the past, as she thinks about the kiss in the interim. In an attempt to get her to talk, Lamia offers her a jar of strawberry jam, and the elder tells tales about the place of men in the previous society. When Lamia can't resist admitting that Max and Albert have a certain something intriguing about them, The elder observes that Lamia must be falling in love. The elder then inquires as to what will happen to the guys, to which Lamia replies that they will undergo naturalization, which entails having surgery to change their gender. The elder becomes enraged and declares that for them, it's worse than death, adding that having men is their only chance to return to normal. Later on, Max and Albert are discovered spying on a class that is indoctrinating the women with false historical narratives. The men decline Lamia's request for them to sign a document authorizing the naturalization. Additionally, Albert says he won't cooperate unless they are given freedom. The ceiling opens unexpectedly after Lamia leaves, revealing to the men a large group of women observing them. The guy's future is being discussed, but rather than going to trial, it devolves into a dispute between the Genetics and Archeo factions. While Genetics wants to kill the men and use them in experiments, Archeo wants to force the men to undergo the surgery. Max and Albert devise an escape plan while the women vote. As soon as they kiss the guards, the combination of their awakening hormones and shock causes them to pass out. The pair has already left by the time Archeo and his surgical idea win by a single vote. As they move through the building, they are kissing any woman who tries to stop them from unconsciousness. They eventually discover a lift and take it to several floors, where they discover more strange discoveries one after the other. They arrive at a location far below ground and find a mine shaft along with a few objects on the ground, including a 1993 newspaper that describes the start of the war, a boot, and a bottle of alcohol. When the security team discovers them at that precise moment, the two flee via a waste chute. They arrive in a deserted neighborhood where anarchists reside free from the repressive government, giving them the opportunity to partake in illicit activities like dancing, music, and woman-on-woman combat. Max and Albert foolishly witness two people kissing and are apprehended by two rebels who mistake them for government spies. Meanwhile, the security team arrives and launches an attack. The guards can't decide who to arrest first, so chaos breaks out as the rebels panic and the guys manage to get away. The men separated amid the confusion, but they were fortunate to reunite at the lift, where Lamia happened to stumble upon them. Max is dubious when she offers to take them outside to see the scenery. They accept to follow her to an odd room equipped with a periscope, after Albert reminds them that this is their only opportunity. When the men go through it, they discover that women have been living underground because there is no hope for improvement, and the outside world is completely dark and desolate. As a side effect of the M-bomb, their system always detects radiation levels of at least 300 units, which prevents them from going outside. But Max and Albert would rather take a chance than make that their home. After hearing that they won't cooperate, Lamia is disappointed and assumes that they must be obedient employees. She notifies security, and the men are soon apprehended once more. Lamia receives a pin symbolizing a promotion from Emma and another woman, who also congratulate her on her cunning scheme, but she doesn't feel joyous or proud. The guy's attempt to flee has labeled them as dangerous, so Lamia is then asked to turn over all the information she has gathered on them to Genetics, which will take over her work. Emma teases Lamia, who is upset because she has been working on a dissertation about the men, by saying that they will also have to take that. Lamia tries to argue against it. Lamia is upset and discards the pin. Max and Albert are getting ready for the procedure in the interim. Given the scarcity of protein sources in today's world, their organs will be donated to elderly women, and the remainder of their bodies will be synthesized for nutritional purposes. Max is shocked to learn that one of the surgeons is his daughter, who is now bitter against her father for leaving her behind. Lamia enters the operating room covertly and helps the guys escape while sabotaging the surgery in an attempt to exact revenge on Genetics before the procedure can start. When the three of them get to the lift, Albert passes out from having received an anesthesia injection. When he abruptly awakens in 1994, the professor informs him that the experiment was a great success. Max claims to have had a dream similar to Albert's about a world without men. Albert shares this dream with Max. When Albert wakes up and finds himself in the lift with Max and Lamia, the professor tells him that's not possible. After that, Lamia leads them back to the periscope chamber, where she forces them to remove their special suits and makes threats to the guards. Lamia tries to use the system to send the guys to the surface after the guys put on the suits, but a guard informs her that a password is required, and only Her Excellency knows it. Max screams in frustration and the computer responds because that nasty word is actually the password. Lamia decides to accompany them at that point and dons a suit as well. The group cautiously explores the eerie space until they encounter a barrier, which they later discover is composed of fabric. they discover the truth by using a knife to cut through it and cross it. Everything is fine, and what they saw through the periscope was a spooky room with a painted wasteland meant to brainwash the residents of the underground base. The group discovers that their oxygen-filled suits are running low as they stroll through the breathtaking scenery and take in the warm sunlight. Max takes off his suit as he notices a bird fly by, indicating that everything is well with the air. They move forward and come across a wall, which they climb over to find a stunning home. After the others have also taken off their suits, they settle in right away and take some fresh food out of the refrigerator, which Lamia finds surprisingly delicious. Emma offers to take a chance and dons the suit to pursue the group while everything is going on in the subterranean base. She eventually locates the house and spots the three of them, but just then she passes out from oxygen depletion in her suit. In an attempt to help her regain consciousness, Albert picks her up and brings her inside the house. Emma fights Albert to get away when she wakes up and demands to be taken back to the base. They unintentionally turn on the TV as a result of their movement, and it displays an official government broadcast announcing Lamia and Emma's deaths. Then, in an interview, a fictitious Max and Albert express their happiness at being women. Emma accepts to stay with Albert, while Max shows her how her government has been brainwashing her and gets Lamia into a bedroom so they can finally get dirty. Max and Albert hide to watch Her Excellency enter the house, which turns out to be hers, when they hear the sound of a lift arriving later. She opens the wardrobe after discovering 2 dirty glasses and notices Max, so she makes an attempt to flee. She is instantly attacked and overcome by Albert and Max, but during the struggle, prosthetics fall off and clothes are torn. Her Excellency is revealed to be a man wearing a disguise, much to their dismay. He tells how the League of Women took over after the war when he was just 4 years old. His mother covered him up to protect him, while the other boys were operated on. As he grew older, he joined the League and took on the role of leader by donning a woman's costume. Though it was difficult to alter the indoctrinated crowd's habits, the radiation wasn't as potent as they had thought. Then Albert and Max make an offer. In return for this guy letting them live in the house with Lamia and Emma, they'll keep his true identity a secret. Her Excellency acknowledges his fear of women, while happily agreeing. After a while, Max and Albert re-enter the underground base by pretending to be female lab employees. In an attempt to alter the course of events, they plant their seed in the flasks in the incubation center. 9 months later, a nurse...
Subscribe for more videos like this, enable notifications, and leave a like to support the channel.